Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
AFP 2023 is all wrapped up, and we are back home. We got home about a week ago, and we've had time to look back on it, gather our thoughts, and we want to bring you today some of the things that stood out to us, some of the things we learned this year. I'm here with Craig Jeffery, back in the studio on the Treasury Update podcast. Welcome back to the show, Craig.
It's good to be back on the show, and also good to be back in town. San Diego was fun, but it's also good to be here.
Yes, a lot going on for that week out in San Diego.
It's kind of relentless. We do morning activities quite early, and then we go into the evening. So it wouldn't be sustainable for a week, but you start and then it rolls through really quickly. It's so good to catch up with many people.
So do you want to give us a little recap of some of the things that stood out to you while we were there?
Sure. The most notable thing to me was that people are back and forth at the AFP. If we go back to DC, which was a hybrid environment, that was just good to get back as COVID was winding down. People were meeting again. Philly was like half the way back from that point, and we needed to make some improvements, see improvements in the size on these physical events. And San Diego certainly fit the bill. I know there was over 6,000 people. It felt very, very good and very different from what we'd seen the last few years during COVID and post-COVID.
And we may have had more people at the conferences before COVID, but for us, this was a record year with people coming to our events in our side room. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, it's a really good one. The ability to have conversations both on the floor and in our side rooms was really good. So we had breakfast events, as you know. These were the FinTech hot seats for the most part. We had one on tech and one on payments. We held them a little bit later, 7:30 as opposed to 7. That probably allowed more people to get up and walk the distance. Plus, being on the West Coast time, made it not seem so early. So those were mainly meant for recording. But now we have an audience in the morning as well as some of the other activities.
Yeah, I'm a week in and finally getting adjusted back to East Coast time. It feels like I'm waking up super early when I'm waking up at 7:30. It's insane. Do you have anything else that stood out to you?
The idea of the power of a network is how big is the network, who's on the network, and what can you do on the network. And I think of the AFP as this network to learn and connect with people. The network was bigger. The network had a lot of activity, and what we could do on the network, from conversations to different types of learning to refreshing relationships was really, really quite good. Those were a few of the things that stood out. I think some of the other things, what was new at the AFP would be, meeting up with some of the newer providers like Treasury Go, which is the head of that organization. It's a technology firm, and you can find out more about them in our analyst report, which is free on the website, and hopefully you can drop a link in. George Zinn heads that organization up. He was a former Microsoft treasurer. It was really good to catch up with him, see him out and about, and their company be present. Another firm, Boost, it's a payments company. They had a demo booth. They were out on the floor talking to people. Just good to see them and a number of other newer vendors into the space participating at the AFP. Those were some of the good ones. We also, I mentioned the analyst report. We distributed that to all the different entries in there, the companies that were part of that. There were 17 different companies, over 25 Treasury products covered in that report. There's a physical distribution, but also we have that available digitally, which is where most people pick it up. So you can download that for free from the site.
It's different corresponding with people through email that have been in the report, but when they actually see it, it's totally different. They're holding it. They're standing in this booth with all the people around. They're seeing their logo, the stuff they've worked on, their company.
Yeah, and it's when people see it, this book is over 160 pages. So when you get it digitally, it kind of like flip through it really quickly. But when you see it physically, it's pretty impressive. There's a lot of really good information there. Another thing, John, you're aware we've done the FinTech hot seats where we interview people on technology. We started that back in 2000. I can't remember what year it was now. It was the Orlando event. First time we exhibited on the floor. We started doing these hot seats, usually interviewing one company at a time. We had lights, camera. We recorded those. We've moved those into a side room and made them more of a panel discussion on particular topics. Some of these exhibit halls don't allow you to project, put speakers or amplify things to have people come around if you do that in your booth. So we've moved and changed that. But one of the things that was interesting, saw some different recordings happening. Travada was doing a podcast from their booth with lights and the audio equipment. I thought that was great to see that type of energy on the floor again. Very, very fun. So we think these are great opportunities to share, record, and catch up with people who are all in one space, for just a 4 or 5 day period if people come in early.
So this is Strategic Treasure's what? 8th year with a booth?
I don't remember.
It's been a few years. So
I think it sounds like it's probably 8 years, yeah.
Throughout those years, we've made changes each year. What were some of those changes that happened this year?
Well, we moved the FinTech hot seats that we've been doing as a panel discussion at 7 to 7:30. I think I mentioned that before. Okay. So look for videos on those coming out in the next couple of months. We changed, Kai, who heads up all our marketing stuff, came up with this whole new way of drawing people to the booth for prizes, but also making those educational. So there's this whole select a prize. You get it from a ping pong ball, and then you use that ping pong ball to vote. And we'll probably share a little bit more about that. But this allowed you to vote for what were the biggest pain points. The key prize was this ice pack or head, whatever those things are that you put on your head if you've got a headache. And so the theme was on removing pain points and essentially how to remove those. So people would figure out what their prize was, whether it was a Yeti cooler or a phone charger or whatever. And then they would take that ping pong ball and vote. And so from the floor, you could see the voting add up over the time of the AFP. And we also ran that in conjunction with a virtual online voting as well. People were voting for what their key pain point is. So all that information is combined. December 7th, we have a webinar on the results. We'd invite people to tune in to that. What are the results? What do they mean? What are some of the implications? That should be good fun. Other changes, well, we didn't really change our lunches. We continued our lunches with a focus on corporate practitioners on Monday, and then regional and super regional banks participating on Tuesday. We want to have an event to thank people who are in these different cohorts of types of companies, provide good content and let them dialogue freely. And that's really so encouraging to us because those lunches are fully formed. We started those, and then it was always trying to get people to come to an event. Now the room's full. We even have to change the table setup so we can fit more people in the room. It's just a really, really good way to connect with people there.
Yeah. Banker's lunch is always a lively bunch. Let me jump back to the, you were talking about the live survey with the ping pong balls. I printed off a picture of it from at the end of the conference. We can see the results live, and a lot of people at the conference floor walked up and were reading it because you see our booth, and the first thing you look at is the size of the booth. Second thing you look at is this big sign that says, which is your greatest pain point in Treasury? And we had 5 categories listed here for them to choose from: data and analytics, liquidity forecasting, rework from errors, fraud and controls, and then the last one is staffing limitations. It was very interesting to see it rise throughout the weekend. And Craig, take a look at this picture and see if there's any comments you have or description of what you heard from the people as you were talking to them go through this process.
Sure. Liquidity forecasting, that is such a top area. That's been such a major concern and pain point for organizations since well before COVID, probably the last 8 or 10 years. Almost every survey shows that's a top item for Treasury people. And it's, they'd spend more time on it if they could. They plan to spend more time. They want to invest in technology. And so during times of stress, it becomes even more important. It never falls down hardly at all, but it does accelerate. So early COVID, times of turmoil, everyone's trying to solve that problem. The expectations continue to be high. What was surprising to me too is data and analytics coming relatively close to it, pretty high up. Number 2 if you're only selecting a single pain point. And so this, I think, is a key recognition of people saying, how do I take advantage of the tech that exists and perform better analysis, whether it's related to forecasting, counterparty risk, different exposures or business areas. Staffing limitations was number 3. I'll be honest. I expected that to be fourth out of the five, not third. But I guess one of the things we see is is pretty significant, even for the people who are at the AFP. People that voted online who might not have been able to come to the AFP noted it at a higher percentage than those that were there. So that might even follow along those lines. But there's just quite a bit worth talking about, and what are your peers doing and experiencing, how you can resolve those. And when we present on this, we'll also share the different services from consulting to training to data, how we help organizations solve these pain points. So I'm looking forward to those types of discussion. It was good to get people going, voting, getting involved. That also ties into our focus and emphasis on research.
We'll be talking more about this on December 7th. If you'd like to hear the specific results, head over to our website, strategictreasurer/webinars, and you'll see the webinar there, Taking the Pain Out of Treasury. While you were talking to people in front of this game, what were some of the common themes and conversations? What were people struggling with this year that was new?
Yeah, on the liquidity side, a lot of conversations on liquidity, many of them centered on the forecasting methods and tools, which is, along the lines with the game, of course, but focused on liquidity. Pricing, cost of funds has risen, and accessing more liquidity for many organizations become much more challenging. So that was a key area. Staffing, we did hear a lot about that. The capacity of organizations, changing workforce, the Zoomers coming in, having different expectations, being both a challenge and a huge benefit to companies, helping them think through what's going on. This was far more impactful than I would have thought, than I've been thinking. So I'm trying to play catch up to what the universe of Treasury people are experiencing. Another area, besides talking about technology, we talk about technology with so many people. Almost every project has technology with it. But the other area where there's a lot of conversations had to do with requests for proposals, banking, payments, technology. People are looking to up-tier their banking structure, their services, upgrade their technology or put in technology to support the new payment rails, and to manage the ongoing increasing threat to the payment processes. So RFPs were a big topic, probably bigger than other years that we've seen, or at least I ended up having more conversations on that in San Diego.
Why do you think RFPs were something people are struggling with now as opposed to the last couple of years?
I'm not sure, but here's a hypothesis at least. There's been more attention. There certainly is more attention to reducing cost. The ability to perform, to improve financial performance and reduce cost is definitely being pushed out through the organization. Not so much that they're stopping projects, but they're saying, how can we be more efficient? And RFPs are a way of retooling or retuning or realigning what you're doing with your banks. It's opportunities for new tech, which would allow you to do quite a bit more to scale up without adding a lot of staff. And then the fact that there's so many changes in the payments front, instead of making changes in 10 different systems to support new payment rails or sanction filtering or whatever the issues are, people are looking at tools to help them on the payment front. And so, an RFP or a selection effort is really part of that. So I'm, encompassing those in one package. RFPs are selecting new providers, new tech. And I guess that's why I would see those are so important from a economic standpoint and a change in the environment, as well as a threat from the risk side.
Do you think these corporates are making more changes in their banking structures now versus the last couple of years, and that's why it's coming up?
I think there's plans to do a little bit more realignment. The issues and challenges with a number of banks on the financial stability has caused people to rethink a few things, and one of those is not putting all of your eggs in one basket, all of your operational eggs in one basket. Many, many years ago, there might have been a number of large companies might use 3 banks to handle activity and allocate it, let's just say 60%, 30%, and 10%. But over the years, it became more and more, we'd call it rationalization or compression, and bringing it down to 1 or 2 banks. And the recognition on the operational side, you really can't just go with one bank, once you reach a certain size. And so organizations are doing a little bit of dividing that up to have, better coverage, better diversification, certainly on the operational side. And so I think that's where that's coming into play mostly.
So are you saying that fire extinguisher salesmen do better in neighborhoods where one house is burned down?
I wouldn't say that. I'm sure that's true. It's like if your neighbor gets broken into, all of a sudden you're buying the home alarm system, or someone burns down, you do it. There's increased awareness of what's gone on. That's one of those things where, as humans, we get more alerted to risk when something happens. We think when it's not super common that something occurs, we get too complacent. That happens in Treasury. Risk-oriented individuals in Treasury get too complacent. It's the whole rebuilding, houses on the floodplains of the Mississippi, or rebuilding a house on the shores of the Atlantic, right near the coast. Things get wiped out and every so many years because of a hurricane. The concerns about counterparty risk and fraud and figuring out how to do better with those should be front of mind all the time, but we forget about those things. You probably heard me mention when there's that tsunami in Japan, they're like, oh, they discovered these rocks that said, don't build lower than this. This is how high the floodwaters of the tsunami hit. And then, I can't remember how many hundreds of years it was ago, but they put these warning rocks, right? And then people ignore it. It's like, okay, that's myth, or that's so rare we don't have to worry about it. Well, you do have to worry about those things. They do occur.
Yeah, people stopped building their house on the hill after Pompeii.
On the hill after Pompeii. Yeah.
I was watching a thing on that, and documentary on that, and they were saying it's so beautiful that people just built up the hill until after the volcano erupted. Nobody built on the hill after that. They
were turned into stone.
Yeah, something about seeing what happens to your neighbors makes you much more aware. Let's go into circle back around to AFP and next year. What's going on next year for AFP? It seems like we just finished a week ago and we're already making plans, already booking the booth, already booking the side rooms, stuff like that.
Yeah, some of that starts for those who aren't familiar with the whole conference process. Most organizations are booking booth space well before the current year. So we were booking that, I don't know, in the summer, what our booth space is. So Nashville is the 2024 location of the AFP. I think that's called Music City. That's excellent. That's within driving distance for us where we are, about 4 hours. I'm looking forward to it conceptually. Physically, I'm glad we have some breathing room before our group starts focusing on it. And I know Kai is going to concoct up something else for the booth that's unique and fun. So she's done that every year. I'm looking forward to that. We're going to go with a slightly smaller booth because we've had this booth and a side room. And I don't think we need to bring 18 to 20 people, every year to man those areas. We found we could be a little more efficient and effective. Instead of having 8 squares on the floor, instead of 20 by 40 or 30 by 30, we're going to go 20 by 30. We'll have just as much sitting space and room to work out of. But I think we found how to be a little more efficient in working from a couple locations. And I'm going to ask that we find out, can we bring a bike to the convention centers? Because it just seemed like we were hitting 20, 25,000 steps every day in work shoes. And a bike would be way, way easier if they allow it. That's a joke.
Maybe rollerblades.
Definitely not rollerblades. A scooter?
Everyone will recognize us. Oh, yeah, those are those guys in rollerblades everywhere.
Well, that's one of the things. There's so much going on. You might go, I'm going to this session over here. I'm going over here. I've got to go to our side room. And it's like, okay, this is a 9-minute walk. This is a 5-minute walk. And you're doing this, constantly throughout the time. It's just there's so much going on. Yeah, that'd be nice if there was a bike, but,
Yeah, they say that the booth and the side room are next door, but getting from the hotel, walking over to the side room in the morning for the breakfast was like 25-minute walk. It was like almost a mile.
Yeah.
Well, we had a great year at AFP. We're looking forward to the next one. Do you have anything else you want to add for the listeners?
Yeah, it was very, very effective for us, very helpful. So good to catch up with longtime friends and colleagues and customers over the years and have a bunch of new conversations to meet new people. So this was a huge event for us. I think I think the AFP is a must-attend event for every major treasury group, that they need to send at least one person each year, and probably more if you're larger. And maybe you need to rotate staff. There's too many developments, changes in relationships to miss out. I would say there's a lot of really good, regional and super regional conferences in Treasury. And so splitting people up among some of those different events makes a lot of sense. But this is a real key seminal event for, if it was just for relationships, it'd be worth it. If it was just for education, it'd be worth it. If it was just for being able to have conversations on the business development side, it'd be worth it. So each of those makes it worth it. And then you compound them together. It's really worth it. So I'm looking forward to the next AFP. And it was so good to meet so many of our listeners there. We talked about the podcast and content that they read. That makes us feel really good. We work hard to put out a lot of content, and having people comment on it was strangely warming and rewarding.
Yeah, we're closing in on 500,000 downloads on the podcast. And while I was talking to people there, most people knew what the podcast was that I had conversations with. So that was cool to see on my part. But thank you all for listening, and we will see you all next year at AFP and also next week on the podcast. Have a good one.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.